Let's hear it for Mr. 1000, as Jordan Eberle in this game plays his 1000th career NHL game. In the regular season anyway. He's also played 76 playoff games, but for whatever reason they don't count those. So this is his 1000th regular season career NHL game. 221 of those, the last 221, coming here in Seattle with the Kraken. Unfortunately though, for as much fun as that 1000th career milestone was for Eberly, the game itself, well, what's cracking, everybody, and welcome back to Kraken R&R, where the Seattle Kraken fall 5-4 in overtime to the Vegas Golden Knights, who they desperately needed to be picking up points against in the standings to get towards them in that wild card race. And sure, coming into the game, getting 1 point is still not a bad outcome against a Vegas team that really bought hard at the deadline, but it is the team that's closest to you in that second wildcard spot, so you can't really afford to give up points to them, especially in the way that the Kraken do towards the end of this game, as it turns out to be quite the gut punch of a game in the final few seconds. As the Kraken were just 17 seconds away from picking up 2 points in the standings on Vegas and pulling to within 6, but end up coughing up that lead, losing in overtime, and falling 1 point farther back, now 9 points behind Vegas and that second wildcard spot. As for what then that 3-point swing in the wrong direction means for the Kraken and their chances of making the playoffs, we'll get into that after the recap of the game towards the end of the video, but let's just get through the game and how we get to this point for the Kraken. As they go into the game already down a couple of important players, Vince Dunn still out of this game day to day with that injury that he sustained in that game against Calgary. And then add to that the Kraken also end up missing Jaden Schwartz for this game, as he too now is out day to day with an injury. Either one of those players, Dunn in particular, but either one of them could have very well been the difference for the Kraken in this game between picking up 2 points and losing the one in the standings, between winning this game in regulation and losing it in overtime. Although, with that being said, it's fair to mention that Vegas themselves are also missing some key players due to injury, so it's not like the Kraken were at a huge disadvantage when it came to injuries as a whole. Either way, definitely not ideal missing those 2 players for the Kraken coming into this stretch of games where they very well could use them. Who knows when either one could be back, but the Kraken could use them sooner rather than later. But anyway, let's just get right into the game where, honestly, I think we can kind of just skip right through the first period. Not that it was a bad or uninteresting period. I actually think it was a lot better of a period than any of the 3 against the Jets in the previous game, so that whole game combined, I mean, for one thing, it was just straight up better hockey being played by both teams than we saw from either team at any point in that game against the Jets. There were also 3 power plays in this first period, 2 for the Kraken, 1 for the Golden Knights, which is the same number of penalties we saw in both of the last 2 games against the Jets. So there's a lot to like about how this period played. It was an entertaining period, but there's no goals getting scored, though not for lack of trying, as again, both teams did have chances on the power play, and the second power play in particular for the Kraken did feature a couple nice passing plays and good puck movement on the power play that lead to cross-seam passes for shots on the far side from Tolvanen, then Beniers, and I think Tolvanen again, so 3 pretty good chances that all just end up with better saves from Adin Hill in net to keep that out. And the Kraken still are able to kind of levy that power play into some late period momentum that does catch them up and I think even surpass the number of shots on goal that Vegas had in this first period, but they still aren't able to get that lead. So we go to the first intermission with the score still tied at 0. Now, the good news is the Kraken are able to continue that momentum out of the first period into the start of the second period and eventually turn what was a 6-2 shots on goal advantage midway through the first for Vegas into, just a few minutes into the second period, a 14-7 shots on goal advantage for the Kraken. So a period of time between the end of the first and the start of the second where they outshoot Vegas 12-1. And it is one of those 12 shots, as well as a couple of very good back-to-back shifts from the Kraken, which starts with the fourth line out on the ice that pins Vegas into their end. And with this being the second period with the benches farther away, although Vegas is able to get it across the blue line on a couple of occasions, the Kraken are able to regroup and get back in the offensive zone fast enough that Vegas isn't able to get fresh skaters out on the ice. So eventually, when the Kraken can get a change and get the second line, the line of McCann, Burakovsky, and Cartier in this game taking Schwartz's place, and thanks to that combination of Vegas having tired legs being pinned into their end, and the Kraken able to roll that change to get the second line out fresh, they're able to take advantage, Burakovsky in particular, who's able to keep the puck in possession and to keep it away from one of the Vegas forwards who is challenging him around the boards, does a very good job of keeping possession, keeping the Vegas player screened away from the puck, eventually getting some space in the middle of the ice, where he finds McCann on the far side, then McCann and Burakovsky, just a a beautiful passing play back and forth as they cross McCann over Burakovsky. Burakovsky gets to McCann. McCann crossing in front of Burakovsky, passes it back to Burakovsky on the backhand across the seam, which gets Hill completely out of position, and Burakovsky has an empty net to put the puck right into to give the Kraken the 1-0 lead, with Burakovsky picking up his 3rd of the season. And with the assist, McCann picks up his 26th of the season, while Cartier having just barely touched the puck at one point while Burakovsky was working the puck around the offensive end, ends up getting his 8th assist of the season. Unfortunately, though, for the Kraken, it's a lead that does not last very long, as Vegas gets their second chance on the power play almost immediately off the faceoff, and they do end up scoring on this power play. It's towards the back half of it, but they had a number of chances. Eventually, though, it's one chance too many, and a puck that gets across the crease right across Grubauer's face from one side to the other, and it's Marchessault who puts it into the net without much of anything Grubauer can do about it. The Kraken, though, don't allow Vegas to get momentum off that power play goal and push right back over the next few minutes, almost scoring again to get the 2-1 lead. But that momentum is slowed down by Vegas and back the other way in the back half of the second period with about 5 minutes left in the period. In fact, I think it's right at the 15-minute mark of the second period. Vegas ends up getting the 2-1 lead themselves on what... This second goal for Vegas comes right off a faceoff in the Kraken end of the ice, and when I say right off a faceoff, it's basically the next best thing to just the guy taking the faceoff himself, shooting the puck on net on the faceoff. Instead, it's a faceoff that's won by Karlsson, and while I don't want to take too much away from the skill that is involved and the hand-eye coordination to get a shot off on a bouncing puck and then put it perfectly in the top corner of the far side past Grubauer, there's also some luck definitely involved in there as Karlsson breaks his stick, winning this faceoff, and the puck is bouncing on the ice. And of course, with it famously not being a sphere, it's bouncing then pretty wildly and unpredictably towards that slot side wing, where it goes right to the Vegas player, who just takes a whack at it, hoping for the best. It's, again, a wildly bouncing puck, and I think he whacks it out of the air on one of those bounces. And what ends up happening for him is certainly the best case scenario, as it goes straight into the top corner on the far side of Grubauer to give Vegas that 2-1 lead. And the Kraken then do kind of have to weather a Vegas storm after this goal goes in, as they do get a bit of momentum towards the end of this period, where eventually they end up on another power play with a minute left, and in the final seconds of the period, Philip Grubauer absolutely robs Vegas on this power play of what could have easily been a 3-1 lead going into the third period. It's another cross crease pass right across Grubauer's face from actually below the goal line on the far side to a guy on the back door that is pretty well defended, but he still gets the shot off. Grubauer, thankfully, is able to read the play very well himself and push off that far post as the pass gets across, getting both his pad and glove, where he ultimately makes the save, to the far side and making that spectacular glove save on the shot right off the pass, which does give the Kraken then a much better chance in the third period, just going into it down 1 with Vegas still on the power play for another, well, almost exactly a minute. So then in the third period, well, as you can probably already tell from having seen the final score and knowing that we're going into the third with the score 2-1 Vegas, it turns into a pretty wild third period. And the first 10 minutes or even 11 minutes of this third period is maybe the best, or certainly one of the best halves of a period the Kraken have played all season long, as they start out killing off pretty effectively that last minute of Vegas power play, and then just a minute later, they get into the offensive end on a rush, and it's Matty Beniers with his 9th goal of the season, a blast from Borgen from up by the blue line, something that seems to be working pretty well for the Kraken here of late, but a Borgen shot from the blue line is tipped beautifully by Beniers on its way right through the 5-hole of Hill and into the back of the net past Eberly, who unfortunately doesn't even pick up an assist on this goal. Although I will say that at first I thought Eberly had redirected this puck a second time and it was actually going to be his goal, but based on how Beniers celebrated and Eberly not going to inform him that he too had touched the puck, it was pretty clear with Beniers going to the bench first that Eberly doesn't touch it and ultimately just gets one of those honorary assists that we saw Wemberg get all the time with the Kraken before he got traded, of just getting the assist by helping screen the goaltender as the puck goes past him and into the net. Either way, he did have a pretty good 1,000th game. He just doesn't end up on the score sheet, as Tatar ends up picking up the secondary assist on this goal, and Borgen obviously the primary. Who, by the way, with Borgen that is, and I feel a little bit bad that I didn't notice this when it happened, but with this now being his 23rd point of the season on his 21st assist, has set career highs this season in both assists and points overall, with his 21st assist being 4 more than the 17 he had last season, and this 23rd point being 3 more than he had last season, where he had the 3 goals and 17 assists for 20 points in 82 games. Now, with 64 games being played, he's already, again, 3 points above his career high and 4 assists, with just one fewer goal, having 2 on the season. All that to say, it's been a pretty good season for Borgen overall, and as we get back to the game, with he and his roommate having connected on that goal, and Beniers having tied the game now here at 2, less than 2 minutes into the third, things continue to go well for the Kraken here in the first half of the third period anyway, as although they don't really create lasting momentum or offense's own pressure, they do get a couple more rush chances, and it's one of those rush chances just a couple minutes after having tied the game that, off of a face-off outside the Kraken blue line, that's a bit of a weird one where both players get kicked out of the face-off dot at the same time. It's Belmar getting kicked out for the Kraken, and I can't remember who for Vegas, but it ends up being Tanev and another Vegas winger who take the face-off. Tanev wins it back. Larson then, from the Kraken blue line, gets it up again, I think, to Tanev along the boards, as this fourth line for the Kraken creates a rush chance down towards Vegas' end of the ice. Tanev gets it into the offensive end along the boards, eventually circling up towards the net before getting it across to Yamamoto as he follows Tanev into the offensive end on the other side. Yamamoto then back across to Belmar, who's the third man in. Belmar winds up, fires off a shot, and Tanev just gets a piece of it on its way into the net as he got up in front of the net, which puts the Kraken in the lead 3-2 as Tanev picks up his 6th of the season with just that little tip of the end of his stick on the way into the net off the Belmar shot, who did originally think that he had the goal, but it turns out that Tanev comes to the pile and says, hey, no, I actually did touch that. He goes down the bench first, gets his 6th of the season. Still, Belmar and Yamamoto pick up the assist. Yamamoto his 7th assist, and Belmar his 2nd. So neither one of them really picking up that many points for the Kraken, but they definitely make it happen here on this goal after having kind of been the catalyst for that first goal for the Kraken way back at the start of the second period. Unfortunately, though, once again, the Kraken really aren't able to gain momentum out of this goal, and things are pretty even back and forth over the next couple minutes until right about the halfway point of the period, where Vegas starts to turn things a little bit more in their direction. Not before, though, against the flow of play as Vegas starts to get that momentum. It's the Kraken back down the ice one more time with a turnover in their end down in the corner of the Kraken end of the ice. It's 2 passes later, creating a breakaway for Bjorkstrand. He skates in and buries it past Hill to give the Kraken the 4-2 lead, with Bjorkstrand picking up his 27th of the season, and both of his line mates, Tolvanen picking up his 19th, and Gord picking up his 17th assist. But that is where things definitely do take a turn, not only in momentum as Vegas continues to start turning things in their favor as far as that's concerned, getting a lot of the shots on goal and really just tilting the ice this entire back half of the third into the Kraken end, keeping the Kraken not necessarily hemmed into their end, but really not allowing the Kraken to get anything going offensively. Whenever the Kraken could get the puck out and even into the Vegas end of the ice, they really weren't able to get any possession in Vegas's end or get any more shots on goal for that matter. And just about a minute after the Kraken took the 4-2 lead, Vegas does end up responding. It's a bit of a defensive breakdown, but ultimately just a nice passing play from Vegas that eventually is finished with a shot from Karlsson that beats Grubauer with that pass going from kind of top of the face-off circle to top of the face-off circle across the seam. So again, not an easy save for Grubauer by any means. Just a nice place by Vegas, and it brings them back to within 1. It is still, though, a 1-goal lead for the Kraken that they have every chance of maintaining, and with about 8 minutes left in the game, they are almost able to do that, even with really allowing Vegas to dictate the pace of the game and how it was getting played. The Kraken just going full on into turtle mode, allowing Vegas to get constantly into their end of the ice. And while they were clearing the puck and getting out of their end, it wasn't like they were getting hemmed into their end of the ice like they were able to do to Vegas in that second period to get that first goal. But when they did get the puck out, they rarely got it much past center ice and oftentimes just kind of lofted the puck into Vegas's end to prevent icing and get a change. But that did then allow Vegas to just right away attack that next line that comes out on the ice, putting every line immediately on their heels whenever they came out onto the ice for the Kraken. Though again, even with all that being said, and for as much time as the Kraken spent in their end of the ice in the back half of this third period, they are able to survive all of it defensively, keep a lot of it to the outside, and not give Vegas too good of looks at the net. Grubauer comes up with a number of saves, with Vegas getting a few pucks on net still from outside. Eventually, though, with under 2 minutes left, Vegas does get the net empty, and with 16 seconds left, it's Jack Eichel who just pulls the puck off the blue line as I think it was Alexiak tried to rim the puck around the net and get it out the far side. Just isn't quite able to, as Eichel does keep it off the blue line, then just flings it towards the net, where it's Credit where it's due, an absolutely beautiful redirect by Chandler Stevenson, who isn't trying to redirect it on net. He knows exactly what he's doing here, as he just kind of hooks the puck with his stick and sends it right out to the far side, where the Kraken have kind of broken down a little bit defensively. And the sixth guy that they've forgotten about, instead of being up by the blue line, is on the far side, all alone. It's once again Marchessault, who has a half-empty net to shoot at. He makes no mistake and ties the game with just 16 seconds left. And so, just like that, the Kraken, who were that close to getting 2 points on Vegas in the standings, pulling to within 6 of them in that second wildcard spot, they're at least going to give Vegas 1 point and only gain 1 in the standings, but now Vegas has a chance to win it in overtime, which, of course, they do. It's an overtime that starts like a lot of overtimes with the Kraken do, very much a possession game, with Vegas having possession for a couple of minutes and not really getting anything out of it. Then the Kraken having possession for a couple of minutes and again, not really getting much out of it. But with about maybe about halfway through the overtime period, it turns into an absolute track meet. It's 2-on-1 rush after 2-on-1 rush. Vegas gets a rush chance at the Kraken end of the ice 2-on-1, which I can't remember if it was saved by Grubauer or if Larson did a good job defending here. Either way, it doesn't end up in the net. Then the Kraken turned that into a 2, maybe even 3-on-1 back the other way, which almost ends up in a goal, but it's kind of one pass too many. I mean, if Larson does get that pass across, and he didn't necessarily have a clean shot on net, as Hill did read the first pass pretty well, if he gets it back across to, I think it was Tolvanen on the far side, then it's absolutely a tap-in goal. It doesn't go in though, and then that turns into a 2-on-1 rush back the other way, or what looked like it was going to be a 2-on-1. Unfortunately, Bjorkstrand, who's the one back for the Kraken, is on the end of a pretty long shift. He clearly just does not have the legs anymore, and Eichel, who's a little bit fresher, gets the puck, gets to it first, and turns it into a breakaway, and he ends up scoring to give Vegas that second point in the standings and turn once again what could have been a 2-point advantage for the Kraken with the win in regulation into a 1-point advantage for the Golden Knights. So in the end with this game, there's obviously a couple of different ways of looking at it. You can look at it the optimistic and positive way, where the Kraken came into that third period against a good team in Vegas who just absolutely cleaned house once again at the deadline, picking up 3 pretty good players. Even for as injured as they are, they definitely got a lot better here in the last week and managed to not only come back, but take a 2-goal lead halfway through the period. But then there's the other half where they then coughed up that 2-goal lead and ended up losing it in overtime, and not only coughed up a 2-goal lead, but coughed up a 1-goal lead with less than 30 seconds left. And that's without even mentioning that, once again, they coughed up that lead and the 3-point swing in the standings to not even probably, definitely the worst possible team that they could have done that against, as it is the team that's currently sitting in that second wildcard spot, the one team that they need to be catching. Well, I mean, not the one, they could also catch Nashville or LA, but certainly the team that's closest to them that they need to catch to get into a playoff spot. And so because of that, there's absolutely no way around the fact that even for everything the Kraken did do well in this game, that fantastic first half of the third period, that they come back and not only take a lead after being down going into it, but a multi-goal lead, and even playing well up until that point through the first 2 periods. Even if they did come into the third with the deficit, they completely ruin it with that back half of the third and those final 16 seconds where they allow Vegas to tie the game and then lose it in overtime. And like I said way back at the beginning of the video, turn this game into an absolute gut punch in their chances of making the playoffs. So then, as far as what those chances actually look like, well, as far as the actual percentages, depending on where you look, it's somewhere between 10 and 20% at this point for the Kraken of making the playoffs after this loss. Though, personally, and maybe this is overly optimistic thinking, I do kind of feel like the odds are a little bit better than 20%. Still, definitely not close to 50-50. The odds are definitely more likely than not that they'll miss the playoffs at this point in time. But I feel like there's a realistic path there for the Kraken, especially, and honestly, I feel like they kind of have to win 3 of the next 4 games after this overtime loss to Vegas. It kind of came into this 5-game stretch where they play Vegas twice, Nashville once, and then there's the game against DC and Buffalo, needing to win 3 out of those 5 games, and 2 of those wins absolutely have to be against Vegas and Nashville. Kind of felt like they could maybe go 3-2 or 3-1-1, and now here's that one, the overtime loss. So now you got to win 3 of the next 4 games, and 2 of those absolutely have to be the ones against Nashville and the second game against Vegas in about a week's time. If they're able to do that and then take care of business against a DC team who sold at the deadline and a Buffalo team who also sold and you haven't lost to yet in your team's history, then you get into a stretch of 10 games, where 8 of those 10 games are played against San Jose, Anaheim, and a very struggling Arizona Coyotes team who just recently broke a 14-game losing streak, and one against a Montreal Canadiens team who's also kind of struggling at this point in time and kind of has been throughout the entire back half of the season. Now, you absolutely have to take care of business in those 8 games, but if you're able to take care of business in those games and stay within the hunt in these next 4, then you give yourself a chance to get back into things down the stretch of the last couple weeks of the season, where it's definitely not easy in those last couple weeks. You still have a game against the Blues, a couple games against Dallas, a game against the Kings, which is another team you could end up catching here in this playoff race, especially if Vegas is going to get hot again now that they've made these additions at the deadline. Either way, the Kraken really have to buckle down here over these next 4 games to stay in the hunt so that that stretch of pretty bad opponents can even matter, even if they do win those games. Anyway, all that to say, I'm not willing to give up hope just yet, even if this game does certainly take quite a bit of a hit to those hopes. It would have been a lot easier to talk yourself into the Kraken getting into the playoffs if we were coming out of this game with the Kraken being down just 6 points to that second wildcard spot. Instead, it's 9. Now, how likely it was the Kraken were going to catch Vegas after the additions they made at the deadline in the first place, I think there's an argument to be made there. Either the Kings or the Predators might be more likely to fall off down the stretch. We'll just have to wait and see. The Kraken obviously will need to take care of business on their end before we can even worry too much about what help they need to make that miracle run into a playoff spot. With that said, though, as always, let's end this one on the high note with the Kraken 3 stars. As always, brought to you by the patrons over on Patreon. If you do want to help decide these Kraken 3 stars after each and every one of the Kraken games, you can help support the channel a little bit more than you already are by going to the link down below and supporting on Patreon as well. And as for the 3 stars, I think there are some guys deserving of it. The first star for me easily in this game is Will Borgen. He had an absolutely fantastic game for the Kraken, and that pairing has been a bit of a rough spot for the Kraken over the back half of the season. They were very good in the first half of the season when the rest of the team was having its struggles. And now that the team's gotten better, they've kind of struggled, which has been a weird flip-flop there. Either way, Borgen had a very good game in this one. Alexiak also had a pretty good game, and I think I'd honestly go with Alexiak if it wasn't for Borgen getting that primary assist on the Beniers goal. Either way, I'll go Borgen with one of the stars. And then the second star, I'm going to have to agree with Patreon that Tanev is definitely deserving of a star in this game. He does pick up the goal, obviously, with a little bit of a tip, but even at that, he helped that play all develop in the first place by winning the faceoff, then getting the puck into the offensive end so that Yamamoto and Belmar could end up getting that shot off in the first place for him to tip in the net. Plus, that fourth line in general were the ones that set the Kraken up for that second line to score the first goal for the Kraken way back in the second period. And yeah, just a good night in general for them. Tanev also was good on the penalty kill, even though the Kraken did give up the 1 power play goal. So yeah, all that said, Tanev the second star. And then the third star, I'm going to go with Matty Beniers. He also had a fantastic game. He obviously does score the goal to be the first goal in 10 games for him, his 9th of the season. Definitely not the scoring season we're used to from Beniers. He's still done a lot of the other things well and is very good in transition still with the puck. I definitely do think some of his struggles can be explained by being the primary focus of opposing teams when it comes to who they're going to shut down for the Kraken. And that's just something that he's going to have to figure out how to learn to play through. And it's just a sophomore season, the first time he's really dealt with that. But even if the points haven't really been showing up here over the last month or so, I do think he's looked a lot better in the last month than we saw in the middle part of the season. And that's a promising sign going into next year that he's starting to learn how to deal with the tougher matchups that he's been facing over the course of pretty much this entire season after how last season went for him. With that said, though, some other guys worth mentioning. Cartier had a very good game, stepping up into Schwartz's spot on that second line. And Grubauer also had a pretty good game. It just doesn't look that way on the stat sheet because of the goals, but at least 3 of the goals that Vegas scores, he never has a chance on. And then the overtime winner, I mean, that's Jack Eichel's getting paid what he's getting paid for a reason. He's Vegas's primary star for a reason and a Stanley Cup winner. So yeah, with that, it's starting to get late enough that my brain's getting all scrambled. So we're going to call it there. Let me know what you think in the comment section, as always, who your 3 stars would be and what you think of this game. Obviously, like I said, pretty disappointing ending, and we'd be feeling a lot better if the Kraken had won this game. What you feel like the Kraken chances to make the playoffs are, and all that down in the comment section. Until next time, though, stay safe out there, be good to each other, God bless, and go Kraken.